It is 6:15. We will call to order the January school board meeting for District 518. 1.1 roll call. Let the record reflect all school board members are here. 1.2 recognition of visitors and guests. Thanks for everybody that has attended tonight. I'd like to welcome Darla, Ann, and Eric to the hot seat. 1.3 Pledge of Allegiance.
I believe in the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, 1.4 correspondence and recognition. 1.41 public participation. I have not had any. Is there any from the crowd? No. 1.4.2 recognition of students, staff, and community. I believe we don't have any this evening. That leads to 1.4.3 presentation on the district fiscal model by Mike Hoheisel from Baird.
Doing introductions? John?
You can handle it.
All right. Good evening, members of the board, district administration, Mr. Chair. My name is Mike Hoheisel. I work for a company called Baird, and we have had the pleasure, or I have had the pleasure, over the stops at 3 different firms in my 35-plus year career to be able to work as a financial consultant for the district. Usually you see me when we're talking referendums, when we're talking building plans, when we're thinking about how we're going to put the puzzle together for one of your construction projects. This is completely different. So, encourage you, if you want to wait with your questions, if you want to ask them during, I'll just put a single caveat that we have put together an operational business assistance model. And the idea came from a good dear friend of my wife's at Stillwater Schools. When he was at Anoka Hennepin as a young administrator, they cut 3 years in a row. When he was at Stillwater Public Schools, they cut 8 years in a row. And he had a person in the community that was known as a real brilliant person and was probably the most negative public education person you could run across. So Dr. Ryan Lager met with him and said, you know, I'm listening, I'm hearing what you're saying, and I got an idea. That idea has morphed to this model. But the idea was that, hey, when we're looking at educational budgets, when we're looking at whatever, he had a group of students that he was teaching his finance class, I believe at St. Mary's. And the St. Mary's group, he had them do a study of a peer group analysis, and they were to tell them where they would make, or how they would go about doing budget adjustments. Where would they put money, where would they take money away, where would they adjust? And he had been talking to me for years while he was assistant at Stillwater. Went to Belle Plaine, and I said, I can automate that. You're gonna see this presentation in a 30,000-foot look. What Ryan does for my firm is he peels back the onion and looks at different pieces in a true peer group analysis to say, hey, how are you doing things differently than others? Do you want to continue doing it that way? If that's what it looks like, this is what it means? Or would you like to explore something else, and what could that mean as far as budget adjustments and thinking a little differently? So we have, I think, 12 to 14 districts that are using this model in the state. We have, I believe, we may move up to 40 in the next year. And I say that because we have had 14 new districts enter statutory operating debt. Statutory operating debt, for the folks around the room, is negative 2.5% deficit spending in your general fund. And then you get put on a state workout plan from there. So, that little speech took care of 3 slides. So we'll rip through this, but we call it OBA, Operational Budget Assistance Service Offering. When I was a young man, my father was the superintendent of Cambridge Isantius he started 2 years as an assistant and 23 years as superintendent. And I remember him talking about salaries and benefits of your school budget being close to 65 to 70%. Now, that first bullet point, now you're closer to 85% salaries and benefits make up your general fund budget. So we are a people profession, that's where the money should go, but we've greatly lost where other dollars can help out your budget. So many districts are faced with the challenging, painful process of making reductions. But when you make reductions, it's the quickest thing to erode a culture. It's the quickest thing to anger folks, and it especially is hard to take if you don't understand the why. So the last story I'll tell you is we were in Blue Earth, Minnesota with a $4 million fund balance. It got driven down to 2, and we had 2 choices. We could pass an operating levy and referendum our way out of the problems, or we could look at a new class schedule and various pieces. There were 56 red shirts in the room, and they didn't bring me one. And all their teaching staff was in the room, and I said, well, my wife is an Iron Ranger. We buy our car up in Virginia, and I hope I have 4 tires that aren't slashed, because everybody knows where I'm from. We left the room, and 2 hours later, they were hugging Ryan, Dr. Lager, and they were saying, we know you're gonna cut 1.3 million over the next 2 years and help us run a referendum. And we understand and we thank you for doing that. We're giving us hugs. Okay, so hopefully you'll see this arise here. But many districts, they make lists, we reduce, we change, we adjust. What can we live without? Usually, these are the heartstrings. These are the emotional pieces, okay? But what Ryan talks about is, hey, it's the old, as you tell your college kid that's going, if you're gonna boil a pot of spaghetti, it's done if you throw it up against your fridge and it doesn't fall off, right? That's not the way to do budget cutting or adjustments. What people learn through this process is what might be important to one person might not be important to other. So it gives a good cross-section and exchange of ideas. The other thing is, you may pick things that are one-time money adjustments we're looking at. So if you pick one-time adjustments and it's not in the salary benefit, or it's a program, or you don't have a long-term plan with that, you're gonna roll back into it each year. So use an example of this. If you had $1 million fund balance, and you had a $100,000 deficit spend the first year, what are you deficit spending the second year? Many of you probably would nod and say 200 grand, right? With the way Minnesota finance works and schedules, you're looking at about, another 250,000 the second year. It's a 2.5 to 3 times difference. So by the time 3 years rolls, if you don't make adjustments on a little bitty 100,000, you've just eroded your fund balance over the course of 3 years by $1 million, 950 grand. So here we look at, we concentrate almost entirely on general fund expenditures. We look at what you have in reserves, we look at how you're spending, we look at plans, and then we look at how much you get for local optional revenue and how much you get in for operating revenue, just so we get an idea of how are you positioning yourself with money coming in versus how much you have to spend versus how much other districts have to spend. So, where does the district use their general fund? Okay, largest category is that gray on the right. Weird, regular instruction. Okay, that's a good thing, folks. We're here for a reason. So if you take the gray and round all the way to the right with pupil services, instructional support, special ed, career and technical, all those instructional pieces, that's about 3/4 of your budget is going to those components. You'll see district level administration, school level administration up there, and then capital expenditures. That changes year by year depending on what is rolling through on your facility plans. That usually ebbs and flows a little bit lower, but we hit a little higher expenditure year for the district in '23. By the way, we just got state data in for fiscal '24 this last week. So we'll be reprogramming everything for fiscal year '24 because everything was due by December 31st. With that, we look at a potential peer group analysis. So the idea is we can do a peer group and say, okay, on this particular peer group, if you look at all grade enrollment, everybody's in that lower 4,300 to 3,900 across the board. If you look at percentage of eligible free and reduced, your good comps are you and Albert Lee. Okay? Everybody else is about half in that category. You look at English learner count. Well, we know out here that's going to be, you're not going to comp with anybody in your equal size. Special ed services. Oddly enough, you're the lowest. Students experiencing homelessness. Okay, once again, high EL population, possibly also homeless. And then of course, non-white enrollment, different things, public school open enrolled in students, public school open enrolled out. We want to know if you're a gainer or loser to your biggest competitors. Your biggest competitors are public schools. So that number right there doesn't include charter school and homeschool. Okay, so you're 134 positive. Albert Lee and Alexandria are negative. Northfield, New Prague, Sauk Rapids are very high positives, and then Sartell St. Stephen is a loss. So then we look at that quick revenue look, and if you look at 518, very top, you've got an operating levy dollar of $500. So between LOR, local optional revenue, and the operating levy, you're getting in about 5.5 for your 5.5 million, and your rank is a 4. All this is telling me is that if we get to Sauk Rapids, Rice, and Sartell rank 1 and 3, that they get less money than a Worthington. So the highest amount is going to be 659, which is going to be Northfield. Okay, what is Northfield? Collegetown, right? So based on just looking at size districts, and what we've been doing is we've been doing two analysis. One, we do a peer group who you do your test scores against and other things that you use, and then we look at some of this information. So you'll notice that we concentrate on these 7 pieces of the general fund. So there's actually 11 components, but why we only do these 7 is we don't have special education in here, we don't have career tech, we don't have capital expenditure, and I'm forgetting, we'll hit the next one. The reason we do that is there's a lot of transfer in and out. So if somebody's transferring dollars here and transferring, we won't get good data when we're looking at that 30,000 look before we start calling, making the calls and asking for other districts to participate and give us their information. Here you will see, it looks ugly on the screen and I apologize, but I know the board has a copy. Here's a ranking in each one of these different areas. But if we were to look at Worthington down here, you're going to see 3,376 sum of students. Now you saw a different figure on a previous slide. Okay? Wonderful MDE does their calcs, and in some spots they do adjusted pupil units where they're weighted. Others they do who's enrolled by head. This happens to be who's enrolled. So with that, you'll see regular instruction, pupil support, and instructional support are all red. Okay? In the heat map. You will get district level administration and, well, I should say school level administration and transportation, you're getting ones. That means out of that peer group, you're spending the least amount of money per pupil. So, you're looking at regular instruction, pupil support, and instructional support as on that continuum, you are averaging, you have a score of a 31. I will tell you that if you were a Bella Plain, an Esco, and a Jordan, they would all be, if we rank them against you with 2,000 kids to 1,300 kids, those are three of the top 10 lowest spending districts in the state. Now, because MDE, in their wonderful wisdom, has messed, I'm just gonna say, they messed around with your VIBE program. Some of the data, when we do look backs, because we started doing this in 19, and we've kept all that data going forward, your data kind of ebbs and flows because of this enrollment. When we know that, we can unpeel that onion. So with that, the top two least expending per student are New Prague and Sartell, with Alexandria being the third, Sauk Rapids Wright being the fourth, and Worthington being the fifth. So you're getting fourth most revenue, and you're spending the fifth highest. So you're in that range. So what we do is then we've got a separate model that we hit the button and we go line item by line item in your UFARS codes, and we'll say what sticks out. Okay, so something might be the one that I got a call on this morning. I believe Edina, Hopkins, and St. Louis Park are all looking at the model. And there's one out of three of those districts. Two of them are spending, they're allocating 110 to 170,000 in nursing costs in their general fund. And the third district is allocating 700 grand. And most of that is allocations coming out of their special ed fund. So the key to this, what I leave you with is, when you're looking at things at a high level, you have to drill down, because not everybody codes the same. To find out what the UFARS is standard, it seems pretty easy. And yet when you look at how many codes are in here, it's pretty easy to see. There was a study done 10 years ago for resource officer. And the 13 superintendents that were chosen across the state all had a resource officer. All 13 had a different UFARS code for that one single resource officer, and every officer was doing the same thing. So although we try to make it standard in Minnesota, it really isn't. So with that, our approach is meet and discuss, learn your long-term goals, establish those comparable districts. Here's your peer group analysis, here's your Power 6, meaning we take the 3 districts larger than you in population and 3 districts less than you. We combine that all up, we provide the OBA model, examine expenditures, rank them side by side, and then start to examine comparable district costs, what's out of line, what's in line, what are we seeing, and for that initial approach, it's $10,500. We then, many of our districts use something like this. It's a little different format in our other model. And so when they get their organizational meeting, like Jordan has called twice now and said, is the data ready? Is the data ready? In our organizational meetings next Saturday. Or they go in a work session for 6 hours on a Saturday. And they review that and say, okay, if we want to move an assistant principal to a dean, or if we want to do this to that, how's it going to affect our numbers here? Where are we at? How's it going to do? And all of a sudden they start using that as a model to keep, hey, how does that fit in the big picture? If we do decide to do that, if we do decide with a contract negotiation, if we do decide to add that program, how does it fit? And why would we want to do that? Oh, okay, yeah, we want to put more dollars in that category. Then let's do it. But then everybody's aware of where everybody's seeing that goal. And then then the annual fee, we call it a magazine subscription. Most of those 14 districts that I talk about they get the model. It's on their own special folder, and then they can play with the model how they see fit, and then we help them if they have questions or want us to investigate anything. And then with that, I put the names of my 3 colleagues in-house in Baird, and Dr. Ryan Lager, who's allowed by the Belle Plaine School District to consult with us to provide the, like I said, peeling back the onion and walking through. I don't know. See how long it takes to load here, but I wanted to show you so remember when I said a little bit up and down on pupils? Your ADMs are across that black. Okay, so you had a high of 3,900 again. We're back to 3,600. Last year in 22-23, down a little bit. But I wanted to show you, because of those pupil units, if you concentrate on this statewide rank, I don't want statewide rank. I'm gonna go rural rank. You're 86th lowest spender in the state in 2018 fiscal year, which means fall 17, spring 18. The 86, 89, 42. Yeah, that's that anomaly year. Now you got to count the kids. Okay? Now 147. Well, they took them away. Okay? 108. So that just gives you an idea. And the last piece I wanted to show you is if we ranked, you'll see how much you're spending, you'll see high, and if we were suggesting an adjustment, so if we said instructional support, okay, you got the highest rank at a 7. If we came in here and said, hopefully I can do this with the keyboard. If we were to look at 200,000, you stay at 7. Okay, if you were looking at $1.2 million difference, you move to a 4. Okay, you just, by that simple thing, you see that it all of a sudden, hey, there's our adjustment over there, it clouds it over here, now you're at 28, now you're in the lowest, you're in the 3, you're 4. Okay, that's the start. And then what we do is we write up every one of these sections of district level. And then the last piece, comparable data. This is where I wanted to show you. We've got your test scores. I want specific district. There's your career tech, special education, student activities, and capital expenditures. Those 4 green ones are the other general fund ones that we don't put that are in the Minnesota report card. Okay, so anybody can come look on this online. We just have it available to one touch. Okay, we put any district in the state immediately in here, just by coming in here and changing a district number. So if we looked at a little district that's running a referendum here, just to the north of you, we'd go Minneota, and we'd get 552 all-grade enrollment. Okay, we'd never comp them with you, unless you wanted to see test score results. Okay. Once again, we never comp because you have such a divergent demographics. Might be good to know, but beyond that, not a good comp. So you kind of get to see the model there too.
Okay, any questions for Mike from any of you?
I have a few, if that's okay.
Yeah, go ahead, Darla.
All right. So if we go back up and you were just talking about that potential peer group,
Yes.
I've got some questions on that.
Yep.
One, how do you determine that peer group? Is it are you starting with the size of the school? Because I look at the potential that you have up here for peer group, and I don't see a lot in common other than the size of the school. We are, I believe, a bit of a unicorn. So how do you do an apples to apples comparison against other districts,
Once
given?
again, we look at, okay, who, when you make your presentations on test scores, who you see yourself comparing to? So we'll talk with administration and say, okay, what do you feel closest to? And then we come in and say, we start plugging in numbers, we look at that, we look at this group and say, who should we be comparing to, or are you all right with that? So it's a separate meeting where we decide who we should compare to, and if we're doing, in this instance, this is pretty close to your 3 districts and pupil units above and 3 districts pupil units below. So we'd start there based on total enrollment, then we'd go see if we can find better comps.
Okay, so
In
you're,
your
go-
case, we're gonna need to do both.
you're
We're
gonna,
gonna need 2 separate OBA models to get, to peel back the onion.
okay, so you started with enrollment, and then you went from there. Who
And the
does,
reason being, we want people that are making decisions, and we probably wouldn't choose a 2 high school district versus your single high school district.
no,
We
that's,
probably wouldn't choose somebody that has 5 elementaries versus your couple elementaries.
that's fair. What I'm asking is if you're going to go out and find 6 districts that are comparable to us as far as English learner students.
Correct, it's gonna be a challenge, absolutely.
And if we're making budget decisions and decisions on who's interacting with those students, I just think that that's maybe a more important factor than the size of the school.
And that will be kind of how we compartmentalize and say, okay, when we look at the service offering here, here's how they're set up versus you.
Okay,
Or maybe that's not the whole, we can't just put a number in and say this is a great model and go.
fair enough.
That's the beauty of this model is we can use it to get a start, and then we're gonna have to go and say, okay, looking through our data, who is higher than 55% for eligible free and reduced, or higher than 30% for EL?
Because this suite, from a comparison perspective, the closest there for English learner is a third of what we have, and homelessness as well. So not super close.
No, I think Wyndham, John? Was there, it was close. But that'll all, like I said,
Enrollment
we'll
would-
work through that.
Enrollment would be an issue, and again, you can, based on this model, how I understand it works, you could do a couple different comparisons so that you can, and to answer your question, we can judge then based on our student population.
And in that, like, for instance, Thief River Falls, same square footage per building as Jordan, Belle Plaine, and, I think they were a little bit smaller in TCU, Southwest Metro. Okay, most of those districts are running 9 to 14 custodians. Thief River Falls, they had 27 positions, of which 24 were filled. So our recommendation for adjustment was, so it came to a few components that they could work together with students during the school day. Maybe garbage was only every other day. But it really came down to, we recommended an adjustment for an increase in pay for custodians. You're having trouble keeping and retaining, because you're in complete competition with DigiKey and Articad. So if you wanna retain and get these people, you need to retain at the 12 to 14 mark. You need to raise that, and then you won't have all these open positions all the time. So there's a give and take here, that's what came out of peeling that onion back.
I have a couple more on the data points. You said that you're using 7 of the categorical
Yep.
focus out of the general fund. And you said that there are other data points that are available, and does that include test scores, I think you mentioned? Is that in the model as well?
Yes, that was in that Excel model that I had up.
Okay, so the breadth of it goes beyond these 7 pieces.
Yeah, like, we used this in Gibbon Fairfax Winthrop, when they decided to get down to a single site, and are building it right now, 2 years later. And the school board said, wait a minute, we'll come back to that. We had their peer group up, and I said, you know, you're hearing how bad your school district is. You're hearing this, you're hearing that. But look at your test scores compared to your neighbors. And we flipped over and said, look at your test scores to your peer group. We're really not that bad, are we, Michael? Nope. You're doing just fine. And they said, we need to communicate that with folks. Now, when you have the challenges that you have here in Worthington, are your test scores going to show a percentage that people are gonna frown upon and can't understand? Meaning, if we go around the state and I plug different districts in quickly, you're gonna see most everybody 48 to 69%. And you're all gonna go, those are pretty low. Nobody's at 100. So you need to take that in mind when you're doing these different standardized tests and comparisons, and who's taking them. But all that, like I said, all that kind of comes out.
Okay. And then you also mentioned peeling back the onion, so I presume there's secondary and tertiary levels here of what we can dig into from the
Oh.
data points?
Yes, we'll get,
Okay.
we ask for, when we establish the peer group, or the districts that we are, we may even have some of the data already on hand, but we'll get every contract. We'll ask questions like, how are you staffed in each one of your schools? And we'll see where are you coding your IT expenditures, what are you doing here? We'll see in the model where that sticks out.
So some of that is cleanup behind the scenes as well.
If we're going to be giving you advice and say, here's our recommendation for a possible adjustment or solution, we wanna make sure that we're giving you a good advice.
Okay.
So like a Blue Earth School District had 2 full-time persons that, in the custodial, that all they did on a given day were fix things. And we said, you need to get down to one of those people, you need to reinvest your LTFM at your high school, your newest building, you need to do a project here, and you need to hire kids summer help to cover that gap. So it was a 50 grand here, 50 grand here was $100,000 cut in the custodian, or an adjustment in their custodian group. And their head custodian has been there for 35 years, and Al Geezer is one of the best in the business. And he's kept that school district running like no other, old boilers, everything. And he said, I can use those, I can do that. He wasn't the one that gave a hog, but.
Last question, I promise. All of this data is available publicly that this model is based on from the Minnesota Department of Education?
In some way, shape, or form, it's out there.
Okay.
It's not easy to get it mined and understand where you're getting it from. Like I said, people can go into the categoricals and say, okay, what makes up district level admin versus school admin? And how are you coding? Okay. We have the model, the next model behind this, which would bog me down in here. We have a drop-down button where I can see all 170 codes under district level administration. And then we can compare that to your peer group. So it's there, it's just not easy to get to.
Okay, any other questions?
Mike, just quick, how does the training work? The ongoing fees every year? Is there training to our admin team, to the school board? And then so we can fully utilize all the different peels of the onion, so to speak? How does the training piece work?
It's been different in every district. Usually we spend more time with the superintendent and the finance committee. And then they ask the questions and how will this help and how can we set it up? And then, like I said, it's on that joint drive that the school district has access to with a code, from Baird.
Okay.
And then, for instance, Dawson Boyd has just started this model in, I think they signed on December 5th, 10th, something like that. And I know they've had 3 finance committee meetings already and walked through everything yesterday morning. And so then we'll, based on how they want to use that, we'll write up or answer any questions. And then, Houston Public Schools, very, very much a headliner in online services, much like yourself. We built them a special model, a side model. I said, hey, how could we maximize the amount of kids on some specialty subjects and yet keep most of the dollars at the district that you're getting the student from? And so we wrote a program that said, hey, if you need this many to pay this teacher, and then we wrote that up for them. So we had an offshoot of this and we just included it in this model. So if there's something that comes up and we can program it for you that'll be additional help for your district, we'll do that too.
Okay, and that's included in the annual fee, whatever that is, okay.
So along those lines, you've mentioned giving advice and recommendations. I understand that the subscription to the model or to the data is $10,500, but what is the fee structure like for you to analyze it and give us recommendations if that's something we're looking for?
That's all in that 10,500.
Okay.
We wanted to make it as transparent as possible. You have a model that you can see the result of your decisions as you make them, or as contemplating what that would do. And so once we get it set up and we see the points and have our comp group, we can do our thing. And then, for instance, just down the road, Fairmont. And I say down the road pretty flippantly because I travel 30 to 40,000 miles a year with Baird. So down the road does seem like Fairmont to me, but, they have a wonderful fund balance, but they see many pressures hitting them based on where enrollments go, the what-if scenarios, and so they're using it. And then they have started using this at the board level to say, yep, this is what, we're still there. And they also use it as a thing to tell the community that, hey, we're pretty good stewards of your money, look what we do.
Mr. Chairman, a question on that. What is the community available platform, or how does that look? Is there do you develop a platform that the community can access this, or this is only for us to access and then decide how to disseminate?
Probably the latter, in that you'd have the file folder and you could have it up for the public. And we usually have the people that we work with, they'll say, hey, can we have this where we can grab it off the website? We'll say, hey, we'll PDF that to you so that it can be shown however you want to show. And if there's a special printout or something that somebody wants, we just customize that real quick.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, thanks, Mike, for your presentation and time for coming tonight.
Thank you so much for having me. Have a good rest of your meeting and a good kickoff to the second half of your school year.
Okay, moving forward, 1.4.4, presentation on AI by Amy Ernst.
Michaela Massey and I were supposed to do this presentation together. However, she is running the scoreboard at the basketball game tonight, so it's just me. We did this at Kiwanis today, and before we got started, they cheered for us. So the bar is pretty high. All right, thank you. I'm gonna start by showing you a video that's a minute 43 seconds, so don't don't worry that it's gonna be super long, done completely in AI. So this is not her and I talking, it's just an example of what can be done in the realm of AI, because what AI presentation wouldn't be created only by AI, right? So, here we go.
Imagine a classroom where each student receives personalized attention tailored to their unique learning style. AI is not a distant dream. It's reshaping education today, making this vision a reality.
AI can automate administrative tasks, freeing educators to focus on what truly matters, teaching. This shift allows teachers to engage more deeply with students, fostering a more enriching learning environment.
AI-driven tools adapt to individual learning styles, offering real-time feedback and support. These tools empower students to learn at their own pace, enhancing their educational journey.
AI fosters critical thinking and problem-solving skills, preparing students for future challenges. By integrating AI, we cultivate a generation of innovative thinkers ready to tackle complex problems.
Concerns about AI in education, such as data privacy and ethics, are valid. It's crucial to implement strategies ensuring AI is used responsibly, safeguarding student information and maintaining trust.
Teacher training is vital for effective AI integration. By equipping educators with the necessary skills, we ensure AI technologies enhance rather than hinder the educational experience.
AI's transformative potential in education is immense. By embracing AI, schools can better prepare students for a tech-driven world, equipping them with essential skills for the future.
Let's explore AI initiatives and pilot programs together. By taking these steps, we can revolutionize education, ensuring our students are ready for the challenges of tomorrow.
So neither she nor I spoke any of those words in that video at all. So that's just an example of what AI is and what it can do and what it may look like in the future. And just kind of give you pause. If you see something, you need to make sure you ask questions about it. The validity of it, the source of it, and where it came. So what we're gonna do is go over 3 slides worth of terminology that you may have heard in the world of AI, artificial intelligence. The first one is generative AI. A lot of us have heard of ChatGPT, which is like writing letters, it'll respond to a prompt, answering questions, that type of thing. DALL-E, which is something that is like creating artwork or illustrations. And actually in ChatGPT, I said, create an image of dad and his son ice fishing. And it created one with a crayon that looked like a crayon, like a 4-year-old drew it. And it created one in black and white lines. So you can ask it a question, you can say that's not exactly what I meant, and then it'll just keep changing it for you. Deep fake generators, basically making videos where somebody else's face appears to say or do something it didn't. That's what we just watched. We use a program called Synthesia. Chatbots. You guys have all used chatbots, even if you don't realize you did. Chat now on a website. You've gone to a website. Can I help you? A virtual assistant. It'll try to answer your questions. If you ask too hard of a question, do you want to speak to a real person? Yes, I do. Alexa, Siri, Google Assistant. Healthcare has chatbots as well. And then LLMs. We hear LLM as a word that gets thrown around quite a bit in education. It's a large language model. You use this. When you start typing and it wants to autocomplete a sentence for you, that's part of a large language model. Each business, company that has their own vocabulary, like education has its own vocabulary, healthcare has its own vocabulary. They all have their own LLMs with their own vocabulary and specific language that model uses. So it also uses like Google Translate for translation translation, and then search engines. When you do a search, anything in Google, for example, it does a little synopsis on top, that's AI. So where are we going? The district has put together a committee that is looking at AI and how we can use it, so we can educate our teachers about what it is, because there's a lot of questions out there. Can we use it in everyday life and not realize it? Yes, but how are we gonna work with it with the students? So right now, we're working on an AI guidance document, maybe a one-page letter to staff. March through June, we're looking at training needs, and hopefully in the fall, roll out some training. So that's where we are with AI. Any questions? I think I should just get like kudos for not taking 50 minutes, right? All right.
Mr. Chair, I have some questions.
Go ahead, Eric.
What research or kind of knowledge base do you have about how our FERPA and having minors using these AI tools impacts our district, and what's our liability in that? Have you done any research into that?
Specifically, with our student data, we're looking at a program that will take all of our student data, help create a eventually individualized learning plan for every single student, potentially creating an assignment for each individual student based on where they are. We have a meeting on Friday with a company that addresses those FERPA, all the COPA laws, and we need to have that conversation to make sure anything that we use does meet those guidelines.
Yes, because my understanding that once that data is submitted, it's going to an unknown collection agency, and so we really need to be aware of protecting our students.
100%, yep. Then that's part of our job as IT, is to make sure that when we choose something like that, not only do they say they're gonna do it, but they are gonna follow up on what they say they're gonna do. So we know exactly where our data is going. Potentially, we would like to outsource it somewhere else, but if we can't, potentially we have LLM on site where our data stays on site. So it's to be determined. It's fairly new.
Right. I have one more question. Do you know if any of our IAT, like liability or insurance structures, protect us from that kind of data, or what? And if we were hacked or anything like that, is there an AI like piece of that in our
That's a good
policy?
question. We have cybersecurity insurance, which covers a lot of, if we're hacked, what happens to our data. I don't know that it addresses AI specifically, because student data is student data, and we need to protect it at all levels. But that is part of our cybersecurity. So I would be interested to see in years, like as we move forward, if insurance companies are requiring AI clause in the insurance. Good question.
Okay, anyone else? Questions? No? Okay, thanks, Amy. Okay, 2.0, approval of agenda. I need a motion to approve the consent agenda and main agenda.
Move to approve.
Motion
Second.
by Matt, seconded by Lori. All those in favor of the agenda items, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes. 3.0, I need approval of minutes for the December 24 school board meeting and the reorganizational meeting, January 6th, and the committee meeting minutes as included. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
So moved. Ann,
Second.
seconded by Aaron. All those in favor of the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Okay, need a motion to approve the items on the consent agenda.
I move approval of the items underneath the consent agenda.
Motion by Lori,
Second?
second by Matt. All those in favor of the consent agenda items, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Okay, 5.0 main agenda, 5.1 monthly financial overview, and that will go to Carmen.
The board should have the district revenue expenditure report for the period ending December 31st, 2024. We are 50% through our fiscal year, so halfway through. So as you look through our actual budget percentage compared to last year, our collective revenues are running very close to where we were last year. At this time, it's 46.21 currently compared to 45.3% last year at the same time. You see a slight increase this year, but it is very common based on this time of year and how our revenues come in from state and levy dollars. And our expenditures are also on track with 40.55% this year compared to 40.24% last year at the same time. There have been no unusual revenues or expenditures at this point, and things are moving along as expected with our budget and our numbers.
Okay, any questions for Carmen on the budget review, or financial review? Thanks, Carmen. Okay, 5.2, approve the first reading of policy 213, school board committees. John?
So the policy 213 was presented to the committee, and there was recommendation for approval on that. I did get an email from Erin in regarding a couple items that she wanted me to look at. I did not update any of that she brought up for tonight's meeting, just because it was this morning and not a good thing to update it that close to the board meeting. Those are probably things the committee will have to talk about as far as potential updates. Again, I'll remind you, this was typed up, done, and the school attorney did review it at this point. Doesn't mean it can't be adjusted, but I just want to be careful how we adjust if we do anything. So I would recommend you approve this one, and if we need any adjustments before the second reading, that would be a good approach.
And the second reading will be next month, right?
Correct.
Move to approve first reading of policy 213, school board committees.
Motion by Matt to approve policy 213. Do I have a second?
I'll second the motion.
Seconded by Lori. All those in favor of the first reading approval of policy 213, say aye.
Is there discussion?
Oh, discussion, yes. Go ahead, Erin.
I just think that it's valuable for the board to have a discussion about, how much guidance we want to put in a district policy regarding what should be open, what types of meetings should be open versus what we should leave ambiguous and up to the discretion of the administration or to the board when something comes up. I understand that the superintendent or district administration have authority to establish ad hoc or temporary committees. And it's not clear to me in this policy whether in that situation a meeting must be open. I think that there would be the possibility that this policy would leave room for a temporary or ad hoc committee to be established, for it to be determined that they're going to have a closed meeting and the rest of the board doesn't even know about it. And so if that's something that as a board we are comfortable with, having that ambiguity, then we can move forward with this policy. But I think it's worth having a discussion as a board in terms of how clear we want this policy to be.
Okay, and this was an instructional committee item, correct? Okay. Is there any more discussion from the board on this, on the policy? Otherwise, it's going to go back to instructional committee, and the three of you that are on there can discuss the changes that Aaron has brought to us. You're on that, right, Aaron? Instructional?
I'm on operations.
You're on operations, okay.
It was my understanding that if we have, like when we have instructional meeting, when we have, even if we create, and I'm not saying I'm right, I'm just saying that this is my understanding, that that ad hoc committee would also have to follow the open law meeting if it were an established, even a temporary established committee. I mean, we're not talking about people just getting together someplace, that it has to follow the open law meeting. Is that anybody else's interpretation?
I think that's the spirit of open meeting law, but that's not what is clearly written in this policy.
So what did our school attorney discuss or?
So basically, he shared with me that the open meeting law has some flaws in it and is not truly clear. And so an ad hoc committee, depending on who, if you as a board appoint an ad hoc committee, it would be subject to the open meeting law. As an administrator, if I put, or superintendent, I put together an ad hoc committee, it not necessarily is subject to the open meeting law. If the board appoints, or the board chair, I should say, does an ad hoc committee, such as you did, well, it was done a couple months ago, that could be open, but it's not necessarily subject to be open. The meeting was held as an open meeting, but it doesn't have to be. So there's not in the law that when it comes to committee meetings, there's not a clear, defined practice. The policy is meant to try and clear up as much of it as we can, but, and again, I don't care whether it's this district or any other district, nobody's intentionally violating the open meeting law. That's not the goal. It's just we want to be as clear as we can, and not every meeting is subject to the open meeting law.
I think Aaron had two different points. It was the establishment of an ad hoc committee, and that be done either by the board or by a committee, a standing committee, making that explicit. And then also making it explicit that that standing committee or the board itself would determine whether that would be open or closed. That ad hoc meeting, were those the 2 points you were?
One point is that we should be clear on when we as a district want open meeting law to apply if I'm talking about ad hoc or temporary committees, because that's what I think is ambiguous here. You know, what is going to be the policy on open meeting law for ad hoc or temporary committees established by the board, established by a committee, or established by the superintendent? And as a board, do we want to make a differentiation in terms of whether open meeting law applies when it's a temporary or ad hoc committee of 2 or a temporary ad hoc committee of 3? Because when I read open meeting law, I don't see a clause that is, that creates uncertainty or, interpretation when there's a committee of 3 or more. To me, if it's 3 or more, open meeting law applies no matter who sets the committee. I think where there's more ambiguity or discretion is if there's a group of 2 or fewer board members. So that's my interpretation of it, and I'm interested in what the other board thinks and whether or not there should be more clarity placed in this policy.
Well, is there an instance that you're referring to that we've not followed this, Aaron, or
Yes.
typically, correct me if I'm wrong, John, we usually don't have a committee without, it's usually 3 people, isn't it?
There are some that have been less, and there are some of the committee assignments, example curriculum committee, you have 2 board members.
Right.
So there are committees that do exist that you gave assignments to at the organizational meeting. And I don't disagree for the most part with Aaron on if we have 3 board members, more than likely it should be an open meeting. It's when you have less than 3. And if that's not clear in here, I need to make it. I can see making an adjustment.
So I think go back to the instruction committee for the second reading and make the adjustments, and if you want to, if they agree to make it clear, I don't see a problem. If any of you guys, if that's what we're asking for. Okay, is there anything else, any other discussion? Okay, we'll just bring it back to the instructional committee before we do approval of second reading next month and make the policy more clear.
Mr. Chairman, we do have a motion on the
Have a
floor
motion.
that was moved and seconded.
Yeah, no, I know you made the motion and Lori seconded, so all in favor of the first reading of policy 213, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Okay, 5.3, discussion approval of the district fiscal model.
So basically, this was the operations committee. They reviewed this, and of course, Mr. Holheisel was here tonight and did a presentation about it. It presents a lot of options for you to consider, and of course, you're aware of the costs of $10,500 for the upfront and $2,500 after that. And at this point, I believe it presents a great opportunity for the board or the district in general to provide some good information in the future and address some things. So I would tell you, I'd recommend you look at approving this.
I move to approve the district fiscal model.
Motion made by Ann,
I'll second the motion.
seconded by Lori. Is there any more discussion?
Yes, I would like to see more of it based on what we saw tonight and the 30,000-foot view. I'm not real comfortable unless I can actually see what would be considered peer schools. I'm not quite sure what the value would be to us unless we can do those comparisons. And what I saw tonight was not in,
Okay,
it didn't provide me the type of comparison I would want to see if I were looking at these spreadsheets and trying to go through the numbers and make decisions off of that.
okay.
Was my understanding that what we saw was just, a quick snapshot and we, or superintendent, assistant superintendent, board chair, they get to choose who the comparisons are. So we can compare like sizes, we can compare EL populations, we can compare whatever parameters we decide are relevant to being able to make decisions on the model. Was that anybody else's understanding? That was my understanding.
Mine as well. And I don't think that everything needs to be compared to another district. We are an anomaly, we are different out there, so just in my mind, to see something that looks like a red flag or out of whack, and not even compared to another district, makes sense to me, just to see it and compare the different categorical items and expenses that may or may not just pop out without having to compare it to 6 other peer groups. I think that, in my opinion, has value as well.
Any other discussion?
Mr. Chairman, to me, it's a tool we're providing to our staff, and to me, it's more important to ask Mr. Swanson and Mr. Noble if they had a chance to look at it and they feel that this is something that would allow you to use the numbers better and accomplish some of the things that were discussed earlier.
We haven't been able to play with it necessarily. We've seen
Okay.
kind of the same information you guys had, but I would agree with Ann and Lori's perception. And I agree with Darla, I would enjoy the opportunity to kind of choose certain school districts, and it may be for different reasons. But to Mike's point about like MCA data, the reality is I would stack our district up against any district that's similar to ours in EL when it comes to some of the achievement data. And to me, that would be interesting to see. I know that's not the initial intent, it's more financial reasons, but some of those things would be intriguing to look into. And I believe it has that capability.
I think there's,
In that drop down, we're able to pick different districts. So as I've, like he's using the report card and stuff, I mean, there's places to pull that data. Obviously, this puts it all together in a nice format, which would be easy for a lot of us to use. I mean, if you're not familiar with going out on the MDE site and other national sites to pull that data, this kind of puts it all there. And as long as we have the ability, which I believe he said that we do, where we could go in there and pick different schools, just in that drop down, pick a different district and compare that. And I agree too, obviously EL numbers are important in this district. So as we're comparing things with other districts, that's important to look at that diversity percentage. Even as I was trying to work on some superintendent negotiations as we move forward with that search, that's a key that I'm looking for, is some of those are key points. But I think this model, lets us do that. We just have to get used to it. But I agree that I think there's multiple things we can use it for, maybe not just for financial, with the test scores, and that information would be helpful. And I think, like in Josh's department with as we're working on tests, it might be easy for them to pull all that data together in one spot. To me, it'd be less time than as I'm going through and searching multiple sites and multiple reports, and then entering that data into an Excel spreadsheet. I can see the benefits of it as well, to use it that way.
I will say when we look at student achievement, and then when it comes to demographics, we will still have a really difficult time finding any school like us, because I've tried. So there are some, and we would have to probably play with what we're truly looking for, but you're not going to find size and diversity and similar elementary schools within one district. They're just not going to exist. But we can find specific things that could still help us make some decisions and compare us somewhat to others, while clearly looking at it, it may be a little bit of an outlier, like Lori said at times. It's just not going to be the same all the time.
I'm curious whether we could even have 2 different peer groups, one peer group that includes schools of similar sizes, where we analyze a lot of infrastructure or financial categories or metrics, and then a different peer group that has schools of similar student demographics to us, where we evaluate more of the instructional or academic sides of things.
And I think from the board member perspective, it would be pretty good information. I mean, there's 5 of us that have only been here for 2 years or less, and we got a lot of decisions. I think I would have found this beneficial when I got on, so I find it beneficial. So there's a motion and a second. All those in favor of the district fiscal model, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Okay, 5.4, approve the graduation requirement changes and approve addendum to policy 613, graduation requirements. And Josh?
So this was presented to the instructional committee. There's two main changes in terms of grad requirement that Mr. Hastings presented. One is in the Phi-Ed area. We're not actually changing the number of credits that students would need in Phi-Ed. We're trying to make it a little more flexible. Currently, there's a prereq course that all students have to take before they can take any other Phi-Ed. It really ties the hands of counselors when they're trying to schedule. So they're trying to make that class not a required course on the front end. So you still need the same number of credits, but they do not have to take Intro to Phi-Ed in order to get into some of the other classes. So the total number of credits don't change. It's really just flexibility in how the students can access those classes. The other one is actually a state requirement in personal finance. So that will increase the number of required credits. It will not increase the total number of credits to graduate. It'll actually decrease one of the electives and increase personal finance.
Okay, do I have a motion to approve the graduation requirements?
So moved.
Motion by Eric,
Second.
second by Ann. Is there any more discussion? Okay, all those in favor of the graduation requirements, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes. 5.5, approve memorandum of understanding with the custodial association. John?
So this MOU is related to the custodial group, and it's to have consistency with the secretarial 12-month as well as 9, 10, and 11-month employees and the number of holidays. So it sets it at 5. It's consistent with what's in the secretarial group, and it just needs to happen. So I would recommend approval of the MOU.
Do we have a motion for the MOU with the custodial association?
So moved.
Motion made by Lori.
Second.
Ann, second by Ann. Is there any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor of the MOU with the custodial association, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes. All righty. Reports. 1.1 superintendent report.
So I'm going to cover a few things rather quickly and a couple reminders. One, just so you're aware of, it was covered at the operations committee, but in providing an application to the assessor, the 80 acres that is utilized by the Ag Learning Lab was approved to be non-exempt, and that will happen for this year. The 155 acres, of which roughly 75 of that was farmable, that will become exempt in 2026. So that the application was looked at, reviewed after I spent about a week bouncing back and forth and providing information. Do want to highlight the ice arena discussion and where it's at kind of at this point. The city council will be discussing it, but they've asked for information related to upgrading the existing facility. So the city has provided contract. They've gone out. They've got somebody that's going to evaluate that, and sometime in April, May, they'll get the potential costs for refurbishing the existing ice arena. In my view, we kind of at least had those preliminary information, which was extremely high, and I will be very blunt. In my view, refurbishing that existing ice arena makes absolutely no sense, but city council's gonna go back and do that and take a look at, and then they'll do the comparison of, is there value in refurbishing versus building new? And, yeah, so at that point, you're gonna be looking at May before the city probably makes a commitment, and then at that point, they'll start moving, hopefully make a decision one way or another. And the school district at this point, you made a motion here roughly a year ago of committing $5 million to that, but that was specifically for a new facility. And I would recommend that you hold to that. And you did have a 5-year limit. So just to keep you all informed of what was there. So that's that one. That's the quick update. I mentioned the tax exempt. One thing I just at least want to bring up, the Southwest Regional Development Commission has an open seat. If any one of you are interested in nominating yourself or somebody nominating something from this board, that needs to be considered, and it has to go in by January 31st. So if one of you would like to not get put on that regional commission, we'll send your name in. All you gotta do is let me know. And I do want to mention, because not everybody totally understands the restructure of the district office, and we did provide the information to the school board, but I'm going to just do a really quick overview. With the restructure of the district office, there's the superintendent, assistant superintendent, HR director, and we have basically eliminated the director of instruction and the director of operations. And we have, as of tonight, approved an HR coordinator. So there's adjustments there, and we'll be looking to backfill the HR, one other HR position. But with all those changes, I want to make sure everybody understands there's budget savings in that restructuring. The rest of the year currently, we'll be saving a little over $87,000 for the rest of this year. Next year, you will see almost an $85,000 savings by the restructuring. And as it moves out, of course, it starts to decline based on salaries. For every dollar that you reduce and save, this is a great example of, after 3 to 4 years, you're going to be right back where you're at. So I bring it up for twofold, because as we move through further planning, conversations, and things over the next few months, the savings element is extremely important. And it does have a long-term effect and moves things down the road. But not everybody understood the total, what I'll call restructure, and what it actually did, particularly on the financial side. And the last thing I'm going to mention to you is I'll be meeting with the facilities committee tomorrow afternoon, and we're going to talk about projects, but just a few things that I think are out there that I am going to encourage you as board members to consider doing an LTFM bond. Example, we need to do the high school elevator, or it will be basically condemned unusable. So we need to redo the high school elevator on the north end. In the original project, the metal panels and windows, for example, on the north wing, I've talked about, and they're older, been there. The compressor that runs the dehumidification over the gymnasium is out. That compressor alone is a $25,000 cost. Needs to be addressed. especially for those who have graduates. Anyway, that's out. I just learned of that a couple weeks ago, didn't know that. We have an issue at Prairie Elementary with part of the foundation we need to look at, and I have somebody coming to look at it here in the next week. And my point is there's just some things that we need to get taken care of. You can do this with a long-term facility maintenance bond, and I would take a look at a $3.5 to $5 million for that. Please remember, on a LTFM bond, that has no tax impact for taxpayers because you're levying against the allocation you get from the state. Likewise, it actually decreases taxes on ag land. So there's two components there that come about. And as I work on this list and have the conversation tomorrow, I am going to encourage you to consider a $3.5 to $5 million LTFM bond. Part of that we can utilize with the Prairie Roof as an example, where you approve the two alternates, which is $600,000 above what we have budgeted. And I'm trying to actually save on capital dollars. I'm trying to save on assigned and unassigned general funds so that some other things can get taken care of. So, with that, I'll leave it at that, but I am strongly going to encourage that you consider next month an LTFM bond.
So my question to you, John, is if the city council, say we have an answer next month with the $5 million, because that's towards new only, say they renovate, that $5 million is coming back to us, and we'll know more at that point too, right? Would we still have to look at doing this if the decision is made to renovate?
I'm not sure I got all that, Adam.
Would we have to look at doing this LTFM bond of $3.5 to $5 million if we know that we're not going to be committing $5 million to the hockey arena?
It depends on what else you want to do. It really does. Do you want to do a high school kitchen, the whole domino effect, middle school field type things? Those things, yes, it could play a big role in that. I would encourage you to do an LTFM bond no matter what, even if the $5 million came back. Because we can take care of a number of things on the north wing that are identified, plus some other things.
Okay, anything else, John? Good?
Nope, that's it.
Mr. Chairman, a couple of questions to Mr. Landgard. Back to the, do we still have just, not just you, but you as a representative on the discussions with the school or with the city regarding the arena? And we don't really have a representation from our board?
They did agree. They said they would do that on that committee. I have not heard anything since I brought it up.
Okay.
So I haven't heard anything. I did share that with Mr. Robinson after that board meeting.
All right, nothing there. Budget reductions. I'd like an update of how that process is moving forward.
We're still working on it. It's in rough form right now. Administrators are looking at their building budgets and working through that, as well as I'm looking at some of the district options and I should say district-wide options. And we'll have a list put together by March for the board to consider.
And that's based on surplus now with the outlook of being greatly less in 1 year.
Yes, yeah. So right now, the budget reserves or excess is looking at 2.4. A year from now, you're looking at 960,000. And again, that's part of the domino. One of the principals was looking at their budget. their budget, just in salaries, goes up $500,000 next year. And again, when you start having what we've seen on those type of costs, there's some savings that we got to look at. Otherwise, down the road, you won't be making minor cuts, you'll be making major cuts. And again, I'll just say it, my wife thinks I'm crazy for doing this. She said, just go away quietly, and I go, that's not my job. It's just like proposing to you to consider an LTFM bond. She says, why do you do that? Just go, just retire and leave it for everybody. That's not my DNA. I'm gonna keep pushing on you folks to do the right thing. And that's consider kids, consider your budget, and try and manage that all in one big overview.
And with the buildings given a charge of what percentage to target for a reduction?
Yes, we're using 2%. Not a big number.
And that's their leadership team, or primarily the principal and?
Principal,
is
the
developing that
administrators,
list?
yep.
And then what's our timeline from now through February, or that, and then we'll be taking action on those proposals?
You would be looking to take action potentially in March, no later than April.
Okay.
And some of the reductions they're talking about are positions that are currently open or haven't been able to fill, they would do without. So it's not actually cutting people. In a para world, if there were less paras, we have enough turnover. It doesn't necessarily mean people who are working now would lose their job just because of the open positions we have. Those are examples at this point, because we don't have a formal list to bring yet.
And the fiscal model that we approved tonight would help us identify some of those areas that we might want to take a closer look at.
Yeah, if you look on that, we are, as a district, high in pupil support. Some of it's due to our population, which makes sense, but when you're extremely high compared to whoever you choose to compare, you got to start to balance some of that.
So how fast will we all get access to that then?
Again, I'm going to tell you on the fiscal model, that's not for you guys. That's for the administrative team.
So we won't get to look at that model we just approved tonight.
Okay, I'm going to back up, just so I'm clear. That's for the administrative team. Yes, you'll be able to look at it, they'll show you. But again, your job is governance and policy, not to micromanage. And I'm going to be clear about that. Okay? So, I'm going to throw it right out there right now.
Caveat is, as working through the governance, you will see pieces of that. You'll get to see the big picture of the model, but you'll get to see the drill down pieces that administration is looking at to make sure that we do feel that we've got the right comps and different information, or if you have to say, hey, we'd like to see a little bit more. So, yeah, that you'll have access to be able to see that information. I'm sorry. But it's really, we need to get these folks up to speed in a hurry. So that it's an additional tool in the toolbox to say, hey, once we blanket the 2% across district-wide, now let's take a step back and say, hey, let's look at that versus what comes out of this initial outlook of the model and say, where does that balance? Were we looking at the right things? Does that make sense?
It's going to be used to make recommendations to us to make informed decisions too. It really is. It'll be beneficial to us. Okay, instructional, Lori, your chair, but you were skiing.
I was not there, so
And Eric, would you like to comment on anything, or you want me to? I filled in for Lori.
I feel like we've talked about everything,
The only
like
thing-
graduation. Some initial discussion about iPad replacement, but that's a ways out, and Amy didn't have, she had very general information about cost, just to kind of give us a heads up, so that's out there, but no decisions are being made in the near future. Would you agree with that?
Yes, I would agree. It was just the presentation that iPad computer device replacement will be coming, and we just need to remember that that's a significant cost.
And you can do it in phases, or you can do it all up front.
Right.
It's the cost factor. And then we kind of talked about the budget reductions, and then we had an updated action plan. So yeah, everything's pretty much covered at this point. Operations Committee. Matt, Darla. Matt is chair of it.
Mr. Chairman, the only item I would share was that Mr. Langard gave us a watershed project update on the Vote property that continues to meet challenges, but the watershed district is meeting with the DNR and the Bowser Board to try to find a plan that will work, and they still have an aggressive timeline to get it done within this next year. And that would be great to give us a chance to really shape that property in a cool thing.
Okay. Thanks, Matt. Any other reports?
I'd just like to take the opportunity to thank the district for allowing me to go to the MSBA training conference. I was there with Darla and Ann and Mr. Langard, and it was a great opportunity for me to learn and all of us to learn and to have good conversation with our peers across the state about our role and just the challenges that are facing us all ahead. And so I'm very appreciative of that opportunity. Thank you.
Okay. Is there any other business? Future business, I guess I would say Lisa sent us a calendar of the superintendent search that you should have all gotten. I don't believe there's anything else. Anybody else got anything? No. Meeting adjourned.